I love this village. I have been coming here every summer for almost 20 years. Everything is close by, the forest, the fields, and the river. The village is relatively large, 3 kilometers from the nearest village through the woods and fields, and about 15 kilometers from the highway. About 3 years ago, people started actively buying up houses. What can you do? People are getting older and dying, to use as summer cottages. For as long as I can remember, my grandmother always rejoiced at the arrival of her grandchildren and invited them to visit, bringing them gifts. But just 6 months ago, everything changed. In early January, my grandmother started calling us and asking us to take her in, saying that she was old and it was hard to live alone. My grandfather died 2 years ago, and that the sooner the better. The family council, consisting of my father and mother, decided that my grandmother would not be a burden to them. She was kind and good, and a good housekeeper. I live in a separate rented apartment, and my parents have 3 rooms. There is enough space for everyone. When my father went to pick up my grandmother, it turned out that he was too late. My grandmother had died. I will spare you the details of the difficulties of the funeral during the New Year holidays, but I will just say that my dad has become somewhat withdrawn since then. In early May of this year, I started asking my parents about the village. Should we go this year or not? Maybe the house had already been looted. After all, no one had been there for 6 months. My dad suddenly and categorically refused to go there, let alone let me go alone. He didn't want to explain why. I decided not to say anything to my parents and go to the village with my best friend. I visit my mom and dad every couple of weeks, so they wouldn't even notice I was gone, and I could call them from there. We took drinks, snacks, meat for kebabs, and plenty of money. Luckily there's a store there, as usual, and set off in my friend's old BMW, which he had bought 6 months earlier. To get to the village, you have to turn onto an inconspicuous road on the Kiev-Chernihiv highway. Perhaps there are witnesses here or those who have heard anything about the events described below. From the turn to the entrance to the village, as I wrote above, it is about 15 kilometers. Although it was mid-June, we left on June 15, 2013, and, in principle, it was already time for summer residents, vacationers, and simply villagers to leave. We did not meet a single car on the way. I cannot say that the village looked abandoned. Everything was as usual. The only difference was that, on the way to the house, we didn't see a single living creature or a single person, and the store was closed. The store was at the very beginning of the village, and my house was at the end, so after the store we drove much slower because my friend was here for the first time and the roads were in terrible condition. I remember all these potholes from childhood. Soon I began to notice something else. Many of the gates and doors leading to yards with high fences and gates were open or broken. Fortunately, everything was fine at my grandmother's house, although the same could not be said for the neighbors' gates. The yard was, of course, dark. Everything was overgrown, the grass was waist-high, there were mosquitoes and midges, and the roof of the gazebo had collapsed. I knew that the house keys were kept under a canopy by the shed. They always hung there. I didn't know if they were the main keys or spare ones, but I remembered those keys from my childhood. With difficulty, we opened the front door with a rusty key and went inside to start tidying up. All the tools were kept in a closet in the house. By evening, quite tired, we decided to rest. At the same time, I wanted to show my friend all the beauty of my beloved village. We reached the end of the village, the river, and only then did I feel uneasy and a little scared. Doors and gates here and there were open or broken, and we didn't meet a single person, cat, of which there were usually many, or any other animal. The village was silent, as if it had died out. But how could this have happened when just last year summer residents came here? Cows mooed, and pretty girls walked around the village in the company of cheerful young men. My friend nervously lit a cigarette and asked if it was always so gloomy here. I replied that I was surprised myself and did not understand what was going on. We decided to go back home, and when we returned, we were stunned. The door to the house was wide open, although I had closed it, not with a key, but still it couldn't have opened by itself. And all our things were scattered around the rooms. Food was strewn across the floor, and the raw meat for the barbecue was gone. I don't even know what feeling prevailed in me at that moment, fear or anger. I took an axe and searched the whole house, the yard, the vegetable garden, even looked over the fence at the neighbors. There was no sign of our visitor anywhere. I can't say that I was particularly friendly with my neighbors before. They were elderly grandparents, and their grandchildren were about 10 years old, whom I rarely saw. But this time I decided to go over and ask if anyone had seen anything. My friend stayed behind to guard the house. An hour later I returned. The door was locked from the inside. I knocked. "Hey, it's me, open up." I heard the sound of a latch. I should mention that we have a fairly strong one on our front door. I opened the door and saw my friend standing there with a stool in his hands, holding it as if he was about to strike. He was breathing heavily and was pale. However, in that regard, I was not much different from him at that moment. We closed the door again and went into the room. It was evening, but we decided not to turn on the lights. I sighed and told my friend what I had seen. During that hour, I had walked around probably 20 yards and saw no signs of people anywhere. All the yards were overgrown, as if no one had been there all year. The doors of some houses were broken, and the roofs of some buildings had collapsed. I'm willing to bet that at that moment we both wanted to leave the village immediately and return to the city. But it was already getting dark. I don't know how to drive, and my friend never drives in the dark. He gets tired quickly and everything blurs before his eyes. He told me what he had seen while I was visiting the neighbors. I locked the door behind you just in case and started gathering our scattered belongings. I heard the door to the yard open. I was surprised and wondered why you were back so early. And then suddenly, I should mention that it's about 10 meters from the entrance to the yard to the front door, and the door to the yard is very creaky. Someone tried to enter the house. I backed away, because someone had entered the yard just a moment ago, and they couldn't have gotten to the house that quickly. No one knocked on the door. Someone was just trying to get in. The handle was shaking like crazy. I grabbed a stool, but then I heard the door creak again, and then it was quiet. Half an hour later, you showed up. So, you stood in the hallway with a stool for half an hour? My friend just nodded. Then we heard a loud knock on the window at the end of the house, in my bedroom. My friend and I just looked at each other. Neither of us dared to go and check what was going on. An hour passed. It was getting dark outside. We sat in silence, afraid to move. Nothing had happened since that knock. We just sat there silently, listening to each other's heavy breathing. We didn't talk. It's hard to say what my friend was thinking, but personally, I could only think about how quickly morning would come so we could leave. I wanted morning to come quickly, dawn to come quickly, to leave quickly and never come back. Suddenly, a car alarm went off. My friend's car was parked near the yard, but there were no trees that could have accidentally fallen on it. As soon as the alarm stopped, it started again, as if someone was standing next to the car, waiting for the owner to come out. This went on for about half an hour. The sound was incredibly annoying, and I wanted to go out and turn off the alarm, as well as give whoever turned it on a good earful. But something told me that we would be the ones getting our ears boxed. We were sitting in the main room. From there, 3 doors led to different parts of the house. One to the exit, another to the bedrooms, and the third to the storage room, near the table by the window, and then we heard footsteps outside the window. Someone was walking under the windows, trying to be quiet, but the crunch of dry branches gave them away. I must have washed my face right after that, even though it was cool in the house. It was an old house after all, and it hadn't been heated for 6 months. To my surprise, there was no cell phone reception here, although I had never had any problems with it before. It was only 10:22 p.m. Dawn was still far away, and it was unclear whether we would even be able to get out of there. What if it punctures the tires? What? I started. Indeed, if whoever was wandering around out there punctured the tires of the car, how would we get out of there? It was 15 kilometers to the highway and 500 to my hometown. My friend didn't repeat the question. Apparently, he understood that I hadn't asked because I hadn't heard him, but because I was now thinking about it myself. The rustling behind the wall stopped. We heard the sound of wind and banging on the roof. It was starting to rain. Something thundered in the distance. A storm was brewing, which was not uncommon in these parts. The wind grew stronger. The rain turned into a downpour, and the thunder was so loud that the windows rattled. The downpour continued throughout the night, and even if someone walked under our windows or even howled, We couldn't hear them because of the rain and thunder. That night seemed to last forever, but it finally ended. Although dawn was slow in coming, we quietly went out onto the porch. The windows in the room where we were sitting were covered with thick curtains, and saw that there was thick fog outside. It was already morning, but trying to drive in such fog was out of the question. And suddenly we heard someone walking around the house again. The sounds were as if someone was walking through puddles. It didn't immediately occur to me that these were puddles left after the rain. And suddenly it was as if someone ran away and hit the front door. The door shook, but it was heavy, made of oak, and the bolt prevented it from opening. A couple more knocks, and then silence again. My heart felt like it was about to burst or just jump out of my chest and run away from the scary place. I don't know if it was a maniac or some kind of creature, but what was frightening was that it didn't make a sound except for natural ones. No wheezing, moaning, or howling. Only the crunch of dry branches underfoot, attempts to open the door, and the alarm. I don't remember how noon came and the sun came out again. After the creature's attempts to break down our door, my ears were ringing, my eyes were blurry, I had trouble breathing, and the back of my head hurt. Most likely, my blood pressure had risen. Nevertheless, when I came to my senses, there was no fog on the street anymore. My friend and I listened to the silence in the courtyard for half an hour, then tried to open the bolt as quietly as possible. My friend opened the door, while I held the axe with both hands, ready to attack whatever was lurking inside at any moment. There was no one in the yard. Moving quietly, we approached the exit from the yard. The door didn't creak after the rain, so we rushed to the car with all our strength. My friend started it and we drove away. I only remembered that we had left the door open and our things behind when we got onto the main road. I sat with the axe in my hands for the entire 15 kilometers to the highway. Only when we saw dozens of cars and some kind of inhabited place did we calm down. We were alive, we managed to get out of there. The road to the city passed in complete silence. After a quick goodbye, I went to my place and slept until Monday. Less than a week has passed since those events, and now my friend and I have become somehow closer, I guess. We see each other every day, but we try not to talk about the trip. I didn't tell my parents about the trip. I just asked my dad if we were going there this summer, after which he frowned and said that there was no point in going there, and that the house should remain as a memory and not be sold. I don't know what happened in that village, and I can't find any information about it on the internet, except for the most general information. All I know is that even if someone dares to break into our house and take everything that isn't nailed down, it definitely won't be me.